In this episode, we see a reclaimed historic police station, endure yet another glorious sunset, and visit the largest single volcano lava tube system in the world.
Right, we're in Cloncurry, having driven down from Catherine, and the main reason for spending a couple of nights here was primarily because it's quite a convenient place to have a little rest after that long drive, but also Cloncurry has a little bit of history about it, particularly for two Barefoot medics, and especially for one who has a pilot's license, because Cloncurry is the birthplace of the Royal Flying Doctor Service, and we've just been to have a look around the museum, which is actually really interesting. So it was set up in 1928. It was the brainchild of a Presbyterian minister called John Flynn, who was the prime driver behind it being set up, and really from 1928 onwards it tried all kinds of innovative ways to deliver healthcare to remote communities and farmsteads and Aboriginal communities in the far remote top end. There were all kinds of challenges that they faced. Obviously the Depression made it difficult for them to grow, and then there was World War II, but they kept innovating, and little stories like there was a guy called Traeger who was an electrical engineer, and he spent his whole life coming up with all kinds of innovative ways of producing radio kits that could be used out in remote areas, and one of his biggest contributions was a pedal powered radio. So there were things like that, all sorts of interesting ideas around standardized medicines. So they had medicine chests, and basically the doctor over the radio could advise, give the patient one of the tablets from pot 16 and two from pot 35. So yeah, it was a really very interesting exhibition altogether, and we've actually had a lovely couple of hours here. So that's Cloncurry, and I think our next stop is going to be Karumba. But before we moved on, we thought we would come to Cloncurry Museum, which is dedicated to the town itself and the area around. And it's actually really very interesting. Cloncurry seems to be on the crossroads of two major routes. There's one called the Overlander Highway, which starts at Townsville on the tropical Queensland coast and goes due west all the way through to Tennants Creek in the Northern Territory. So in fact, over the last couple of days, when we've been travelling east, we have been driving along the Overlander Highway, but then there's also a route that goes north-south, and this is the route that was actually followed by Burke and Wills in their 1860 to 61 expedition. They started in Melbourne, they came right the way up through pretty remote country, northwest Victoria, the very western reaches of New South Wales into South Australia, and then into Queensland, and crossed the Cloncurry River before continuing north to meet the Gulf of Carpentaria at Karumba, which is where we're going to be travelling tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll be driving 400 odd kilometres along their route. Cloncurry was established here. It's named after the third Baron of Cloncurry, who apparently was a friend of Burke. And just 6 years after they came through this way and discovered it, a township started to build up to supply the needs of people around who were starting to establish cattle stations. It is really quite fascinating. There's also a large part of this museum is dedicated to the history of a community about 40 kilometres away called Mary Kathleen. Now, it no longer exists, it is effectively a ghost town, but it has a fascinating history. In 1954, there were a couple of prospectors discovered uranium 40 kilometres away, and this whole area is rich in gold, copper, uranium and other valuable ores. But they discovered these uranium deposits, and the British Atomic Energy Authority really wanted uranium to start powering nuclear reactors that they were setting up in Britain. So Rio Tinto established a mine and an associated town of about 1,200 people. It was called Mary Kathleen after the name of the deceased wife of one of the prospectors. So that's where the name came from. But this town basically sprung up out of nowhere in 1956. Its only income was from the uranium mine, but there was a school, sports club that won the local Aussie Rules Football League 3 years running in the late 70s, post office, police station, and there were two major phases of uranium mining at the site, but it went through from 1956-57 right the way through till 1983, when the mine was closed and the town was simply abandoned. There's no point in going there really, because there's nothing left. There are just the concrete slabs where the buildings used to be. But it's a really interesting history of what was clearly a very vibrant community that arose out of nothing, lasted for less than 30 years, and has then gone.
We stayed at the Oasis Caravan Park in Cloncurry, which was clean and peaceful with level pitches. We gave it an overall score of 4 out of 5 and a perfectly decent stop. Then we were travelling the 400 or so kilometres to Karumba on the coast of the Gulf of Carpentaria. About 70 kilometres from Normanton, there are no specific tourist attractions here, but the relaxed feel was a great break. And I have yet to find a sunset bar more worthy of the name than the Karumba version. Sipping a great northern beer while the sun slid lazily into the Gulf was another iconic moment. We stayed at the Karumba Point Sunset Caravan Park, which was well laid out, and we scored at 4.5 out of 5. Then we were eastbound towards Mount Surprise and a date with the Undara Lava Tubes. Set in a national park overlying the now extinct Undara volcano, we marvelled at the welcome archway over 10 metres high. And were mesmerised by the iridescence of the basalt rock that formed it. As we descended into the body of the tube network that crisscrosses for tens of kilometres, it was astonishing to think that we were walking in the very channels where liquid rock flowed thousands of years ago. most incredible space, literally forged in the fires of a volcano.
We are here at the Undara Lava Tubes, and this has been absolutely fantastic. It's one of the main reasons that we've come this far north in order to cross Queensland was to come here to Undara, so it's really a big reason why we're in Far North Queensland. If you've had your fill of geological explanations, then you probably want to go and make yourself a cup of tea, because I'm going to get all nerdy now. So, what we have just experienced is really quite amazing. There are these long tunnels through the rock, and they are lava tubes. Now, how they form is that there is a volcano here called Undara, and at some point more than 200,000 years ago, Undara erupted, but it didn't do it like Vesuvius and throw plumes of smoke and rock kilometers into the air. It had a large magma chamber that just bubbled over, and magma flowed out from the volcano and created a basalt cap once it had all cooled down. And that cap is about 30 meters deep and maybe 30 kilometers across. And obviously, as it cooled, there were cracks and fissures formed in it. So it formed like a ginger nut over the volcano. Then, after that had happened, 190,000 years ago, it erupted again. Same process, basalt coming out, the magma coming out and then flowing over the basalt cap, but of course it found the cracks and the crevices and flowed down through those cracks and crevices, and because it was magma, it was lava, it was at like 1400 degrees, it started to melt the basalt cap as it flowed. It's called thermal erosion. So instead of water eroding rock over tens, hundreds of thousands of years, this magma was eroding the rock over a matter of a few weeks, or at the most a few months. And as this magma flowed, as the lava flowed over the basalt cap, it carved out these rivers. But the surface of the rivers then cooled because they were at the surface, and so the top of these magma flows solidified, and so what you had was the magma flowing underneath, the lava flowing underneath these roofs that had been created in these rivers that they'd carved out of the basalt. Now, the reason that these are almost unique, I'm not sure whether there's such an array of these tubes anywhere else, but the reason it is so unique is because just the right conditions have to prevail. You have to have magma that is just the right temperature, running over slopes that are just the right gradient. And crucially, the magma itself, the lava itself, has to be slippery. And the reason that this is slippery is it's got a very high silica content. It's a little bit like Teflon, like WD-40. So as the roof cools and solidifies, what's underneath will slide underneath it without ripping it down. And that's how these roofs form. And so when it's all finished, these pyroclastic flows have gone right the way through the tubes. They've come out the other end. In fact, we're going to go and see at some point the remnants, what's left over of the magma that flowed out the other end. It's a structure called the wall, and what it leaves are these long tunnels, and they are the lava tubes, and they are absolutely incredible. And if you're not interested in geology, then you can come back and you can continue to watch what we're about to do, because that's the geology done with. But there you go, lava tubes, Undara, absolutely fantastic.
And here is the wall seen from the air. It's a little difficult to get a sense of the raised elevation of the sausage of basalt that we're looking at, but you can clearly see the difference in the vegetation over the sedimentary rocks on both sides compared to the basalt remnants from the lava flow out of the end of the tubes all those thousands of years ago. Okay, Sheila, so you've just been for a walk around Mount Surprise.
Yes, I went to investigate Mount Surprise. I had a little walk up and down what seems to be the main street. There are a few unsealed roads that go off in either direction, but everything happens on the main drag. So there's a little hotel, very run down, it's for sale. There are, I counted 1, 2, 3 petrol stations. One of them is also closed down. One of them is a sort of roadhouse. Hard to know what's going on there because there's no signs other than just roadhouse and no petrol signs or anything. Then up the road a little bit there's another petrol station attached to a caravan park and a cafe, which again looks like somewhere that you probably wouldn't immediately be drawn to, let's put it like that. So there are a few little information boards which I paused to read on my walk, and one of them outlined the alleged story of how Mount Surprise came to be named. And the story goes that Leichhardt, who was the explorer from around these parts, he came upon a group of indigenous Aboriginals who were having a feast, a big shindig up on a hill, and he startled them, they startled him, they leapt up and ran off. He kind of, startled and ran back down the hill a little way, and that's how it was named, apparently. There's a very brand spanking new primary school. There's the Savannah Lander goes through here, so we had to cross a little railway line to get to our caravan park. But that's the old railway which was built to try and bring supplies and so on to the town and to expedite the mining. So the mining around here, I think, was the main reason that Mount Surprise was ultimately built. It's very, very resource rich. There have been diamonds found in Elizabeth Creek. There's gold. There was a mini gold rush around this area. There's topaz still in Nembar Hills. So, and you can still get a license to go fossicking from the Queensland government. So there's an interesting little railway station. There's a new little station for the tourists, the benefits of the Savannah Lander, which stops here twice a week for an overnighter, so people can go around the area. So Thursdays and Saturdays the train goes through, the tourist train, and there's a little display, a historic railway display, with lots of old photographs, which I found quite moving, actually. I mean, gosh, they worked so hard. So yeah, interesting little town, but feels a bit sad.
Like Karumba?
Well, Karumba's just a fishing village really, isn't it? That's its reason for existing. Cloncurry. If I'm honest, I don't really have very strong memories of Cloncurry now, so obviously it didn't make a huge impression on me. It was okay.
It was Flying Doctor Museum.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, look, it's got a lot of civic pride, Cloncurry. It was a bit overwhelming, all the rock specimens in Cloncurry unearthed. I opened all the drawers. There were about 10 drawers in this chest. There were several others similarly, and I opened the top one and thought, it's full of rocks. Okay, close it. This one's full of rocks as well. Every single one of them was full of rocks, which are, I'm sure, if you were a geologist, you would identify them, and archaeologists as old Aboriginal implements, knives and axe heads and what have you. But they all look the same to me as an untrained person, and there were drawers and drawers of them. So but yeah, it was interesting, as local history museums often are. It gave a really interesting, very, very personalised snapshot of the history of that little community. The story of Mary Kathleen was interesting as well. Oh look, I've enjoyed it. It's all been really interesting, and Cloncurry, I think, is probably, compared to Mount Surprise, Cloncurry is thriving.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Mount Surprise was originally, when it was first established, the most remote outback town in the whole of Australia. And it's only 300 odd kilometres from Cairns, so, but you know, back in the day, that may as well have been almost the moon, I suppose.
And tomorrow we move on to the coast and Cairns and the rainforest and a new episode.
I'm hoping to find a decent cup of coffee that I don't make myself. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Sheila McCormick, thank you very much indeed for your time.
It's been a pleasure.
And with that, it's time to move on to the coast. On paper, it seemed like a short hop of little more than 300 kilometres to Port Douglas. But as we drove, we reached a roughly 30-kilometre stretch where, as we climbed into the hills, the country changed from this to this to this. I have never seen semi-arid grassland change into mountain rainforest literally within the space of a single day's walk. And bringing more than 3 tons of caravan down these narrow hairpins certainly focused the mind. But before we knew it, we'd arrived at Port Douglas and the coast, where we cracked open a bottle of sparkling we'd brought with us from Kalbarri, remember episode 1? To celebrate finally crossing the continent. Join us next time when we explore the Great Barrier Reef and the oldest rainforest in the world.